What happens when a nation forgets its God and does whatever feels right? Cities crumble, enemies surround them, heroes rise, and desperate people cry out again and again. This is no fairy tale. Here is war, betrayal, vengeance, and miracles. The raw story of broken heroes, fearless women, and a God who never abandons his people. From lion slayers to tent-peg assassins, from twisted vows to a king crushing woman wielding a millstone. This is the wildest, darkest, most human book in the Bible. This is the book of Judges, as you have never heard it. After Joshua died, that fearless leader who led the Israelites into the promised land, an eerie silence settled over the people. No Moses, no Joshua, just heavy questions. Who would lead them now? They stared at the mountains and the valleys, at the cities still ruled by enemies. They held the land, yes, but not entirely. The battles weren't over. So they did the only thing left to do. They prayed. Lord, they asked, who should go first to fight the Canaanites? And God answered, let Judah go first. I have given them this land. Simple, direct, divine guidance. The warriors of Judah turned to the tribe of Simeon and said, fight with us, help, and us take our share, and when your turn comes, we will fight for you. That is what brotherhood looked like. So they marched together, and their first test came at a place called Bask, where they faced a king named Adoni-Bezek, a seasoned warrior, brutal and feared. But the hand of God was with Judah. They crushed his forces and captured him. Then, in an act both shocking and symbolic, they cut off his thumbs and big toes. Barbaric, perhaps. But listen to what the king confessed as he bled. I did this to 70 kings, he said. I cut off their thumbs and toes, and now God has paid me back. They brought him to Jerusalem. He died there, stripped of his crown and his power. Judah's army pushed on, marching into hills and deserts. Everywhere they went, the Lord was with them. But not every battle was winnable. When they faced enemies with iron chariots, armored machines of war, they faltered. Even Judah, bold as they were, could not overcome that. Yet God was moving. Elsewhere, an old warrior was ready to leave one last mark. Caleb. Yes, that Caleb. The spy from the days of Moses stood tall. Whoever conquers the city of Kajatha can marry my daughter Aksa. A steep challenge and a rich reward. And a young man named O'Neill stepped forward. He was Caleb's nephew, but he did not rely on family name. He relied on courage. He fought, he won, and he earned Aksa's hand. She was no ordinary bride, she was bold. Ask my father for land with water, she urged. And Caleb gave her both upper and lower springs. It was not just land, it was life. The tribes pushed forward. Judah and Simeon together conquered a city called Zaphath, burning it down and renaming it Hemer. Destruction, a warning carved in fire and ash. But not all the tribes followed through. Benjamin could not drive out the Jebusites in Jerusalem, so instead of defeating them, they lived beside them. Joseph's people spied on a city called Bethlehem. They found a man and made a deal. Show us the way in and we won't kill you. He helped. They spared him. He moved on and built a new city elsewhere, calling it Luz. Mercy, perhaps. Or maybe a sign. They were starting to compromise. Tribe after tribe followed a similar path: Manasseh, Ephraim, Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali. None of them cleared the land fully. They let Canaanites live among them. Some even forced them into labor, a shortcut to power, a strategy not blessed by God. And the tribe of Dan, they tried, but the Amorites were too strong. They pushed Dan back into the hills. The valleys, then, fertile places, were lost. Only when the tribe of Joseph grew stronger did they force the Amorites into servitude. A late victory, but not the full obedience God had called for. And so the stage was set. A scattered people, half victories, divided loyalties. A land partially claimed, yet fully dangerous. The Israelites were learning the hard way. Having a promise does not mean you have lived it. God had given them the land, but now came the test. Would they trust Him fully? Obey without compromise? Would they remember who led them out of Egypt, through the Red Sea, across the Jordan? Or would they start forgetting? That is how the book of Judges begins. Not with a crown, but with a question. Who will lead when there is no king? Before long, something extraordinary happened. Out of the dust of compromise, from a generation slowly forgetting its roots, the silence of God broke. He sent a messenger. A divine force descended, speaking not to a king or prophet, but to the people. The messenger journeyed from Gilgal, that sacred place of memory where their ancestors first set foot in the land, the promised land where stones stood stacked in silent memory. Step by step, the messenger walked until he reached a small town called Bochim. There he stood and spoke, his voice cutting through the heavy air like lightning in a still sky. I brought you out of Egypt, led you to this land promised to your ancestors, and promised never to break my sacred bond. The crowd froze, stunned into a sudden silence. I told, you do not make treaties with the locals. Tear down their altars. But you did not obey. You ignored me. The silence deepened. The messenger's voice cracked not with anger, but with profound sorrow. What have you done? He did not ask to learn the truth. He asked so they would, finally, hear it in their own souls. So now I declare I will not drive them away. They will trap. You and their gods will snare your hearts. The words crashed down like thunder. A bond was broken not by heaven, but by humanity. The consequences would come swiftly. Then something strange began to happen, a raw, deeply human reaction. The crowd lifted their voices and wept bitterly. Right. There in the shadow of divine disappointment, they cried out with the raw grief of a guilty heart. They named the place Bochim, meaning the weepers, and offered sacrifices to the Lord there, not out of mere habit or cold duty, but out of grief, brokenness, and a desperate desire to return. But would it last? Soon the cycle of ruin would begin again. Joshua, the faithful leader and warrior of the heirs, promise had died. He was buried in the rugged hills of Timnath-Heres, his own secured inheritance. With his death, an entire generation passed. Those who saw God move and walked through parted waters, who tasted victory as massive walls crumbled at a shout. But the next generation did not know the Lord. They never saw the Red Sea split in two or the sun stand still over Gibeon. They never stood trembling at Mount Sinai. And so the slow fade of memory began. They forgot the power of the one who rescued them from Egypt. They forgot the daily mercy of manna. They forgot the justice that shattered Pharaoh. Into that empty space of forgetting crept new idols, Baal and Ashtoreth foreign, names with tempting hollow promises. The people knelt before carved wood and stone, to gods with blind eyes that could not see, deaf ears and silent mouths. The Creator saw this betrayal, and his anger burned. These people have abandoned me, he said. They chase shadows and break our bond. So he withdrew his protection. No more easy victories, no more guaranteed triumphs. When they went to war, they fell. When they cried for help, only silence echoed back. Yet even in judgment, a spark of mercy flickered, refusing to die. He raised up judges, not kings in golden robes, but deeply flawed, humble men and women who carried a divine spark. These leaders rose up, they fought, they delivered their people, and for a brief time the nation followed God. But the moment their leader died, they slid back into ruin, sinking into deeper rebellion. It was a devastating, tragic cycle: obedience, forgetting; idolatry, defeat; screaming for help, rescue, peace, and then forgetting all over again. The Lord watched them. He knew their hearts and declared, Since this nation has broken our bond, I will stop driving out the hostile forces Joshua left behind. I will use them to test whether my people will follow me. So the Canaanites remained along with the Philistines, Sidonians, Amorites, Hivites, Perizzites, and the Jebusites, not because God lacked power, but because his people lacked resolve. They failed, and the world pressed in closer. Their promised home was crowded but never free. God's people lived surrounded by enemies they were meant to expel, foes who whispered in strange tongues, rivals who bowed to carved idols waiting for a slip. Slowly, the Israelites began to change. They didn't just live alongside these nations. They integrated marrying into them, giving their daughters away and taking foreign brides for themselves. With those unions came a decay far worse than shared homes or customs. They began to worship false gods. The descendants of Abraham were now kneeling in the dust to Baal, burning incense to Ashtaroth, erecting altars of lies. And God, whose heart burned with justice and fierce jealousy for his people, let the consequences fall. From the east came a king Chushandrashem of Mesopotamia, a name meaning double wickedness, and he lived up to every letter. He crossed borders, seized cities, crushed tribes. For 8 long years, Israel served him, not as allies, not as neighbors, but as slaves. God's once free people now suffered under a brutal foreign hand. But suffering has a strange way of waking up the soul, and the people remembered. They remembered Egypt and how God broke their chains. They remembered the Red Sea parting. They remembered their sacred covenant. And from that deep place of pain, they cried out just as desperate people do not. To Baal, not to Ashtaroth. They cried out to the Lord, and God, merciful, even when betrayed, heard. He raised up a man, not a prophet, not a prince, but a warrior. His name was Othniel, who conquered Kiriath Sepher, the same man who won the heart of Asa, the same Othniel who always hungered for a challenge. Now, filled with the Spirit of the Lord, he rose as Israel's first judge. He did not come with chariots. He did not come with silver-tongued words. He came with fire in his bones and God's hand on his back. Othniel led the people. He rallied the tribes. He stood tall against Chushandrashem, the double-wicked king, and he fought, refusing to fear or compromise, driven only by faith. And God gave him victory. Othniel crushed the enemy and shattered their grip. Israel was free once more. Peace swept across the land like a cool, fresh wind, not for a brief season, but for 40 years. A generation grew up under Othniel's leadership, safe, strong, and faithful. Then he died, quietly, without drama, without a throne. Just a man who obeyed God and brought his people peace. But peace is fragile when memory fades. Without Othniel to lead them, the Israelites began to forget once more. Forget who rescued them. Forget who blessed them. Forget who they truly were. Othniel was gone, taking with him the vision, discipline, and spiritual spine of the nation. Israel fell again like a house without a foundation, doing what was evil in God's sight, not out of ignorance, but out of habit choice and open rebellion. So the Lord gave them over to a new king from an ancient enemy, Eglon, king of Moab, a man of gluttonous appetite. He allied with the Ammonites and Amalekites. Together they struck like a sudden storm. They crossed the Jordan River and seized the city of palm trees, Jericho. The very first place Israel had ever conquered, now lost, and for 18 long years. Israel served Eglon, a king whose throne literally groaned under the sheer weight of his indulgence, a man whose belly grew while Israel's spirit slowly withered, until at last they remembered. They cried out once more. Mercy answered. This time, God raised up Ehud from the tribe of Benjamin. a name, meaning son of the right hand, yet Ehud was left-handed. That tiny detail mattered because the enemy would never expect what was coming. Ehud fashioned a double-edged dagger, a short sword perfect for concealment. He bound it to his right thigh, hidden beneath his clothes, a spot no guard would check. Then he joined a delegation delivering tribute to King Eglon. Coins, goods, and offerings of forced loyalty. They bowed, presented the treasure, and turned to leave. But just outside the palace gates, Ehud stopped. He turned back and told the guards, "I have a secret message for the king." A whisper of intrigue. Eglon, curious, arrogant, and completely unaware, dismissed his guards. Now it was just Ehud and the king alone. Ehud leaned in. "I have a message from God for you." As Eglon stood up, his massive frame lifting from the throne, Ehud reached. Not to his left, but to his right, grasping the hidden blade on his thigh. He plunged it deep into Eglon's belly, so deep that the fat swallowed the blade, so deep that even the hilt disappeared. Eglon collapsed dead. Ehud calmly locked the chamber doors and walked away. Later, the guards returned to locked doors. They waited, assuming the king was relieving himself. They laughed, they whispered. They delayed until they finally unlocked the door and found their king lifeless. Too late. Ehud had escaped. Slipping away into the mountains of Ephraim, he blew a trumpet. The sound echoed like thunder down the hills. The people gathered, their fear turning to fire, their shame turning to courage. Ehud raised his voice and shouted, "Follow me, for the Lord has delivered Moab into our hands." And they did, striking down 10,000 elite Moabite soldiers, seasoned, ruthless men. Not a single warrior escaped. That day Moab fell, and the land finally found peace. This time for 80 years. 80 years of quiet, plenty of time to forget. And they did. The people of Israel abandoned God once again. So he surrendered them to Jabin, the ruthless king of Canaan. Jabin ruled from Hazor, a northern fortress. His ruthless general Sisera commanded 900 iron chariots. These were not just war machines, they were symbols of total dominance. Every time Israel tried to rise, those heavy wheels rolled in crushing hope, burning fields and scattering courage. For 20 years, Sisera oppressed God's people. 20 years of paralyzing fear, 20 years of silence until the cries began. This time God did not summon a warrior. He raised a woman. Her name was Deborah, a prophetess, a judge, voice for God in a world of static. She did not rule from a palace, but beneath a palm tree between Ramah and Bethel. In that open courtroom, people brought their bitter disputes and left with wisdom. She was respected, she was trusted, fearless. And one day she summoned a man named Barak, a warrior who was capable, strong, yet hesitant. Deborah looked him in the eye. "God commands you take 10,000 men from Naphtali, go to Mount Tabor. There Sisera will march to meet you, and the Lord will deliver him to your hands." Barak did not say no, but he did not say yes. Instead, he said, "I will go if you come with me." Deborah did not flinch. "I will go, but because you ask this, the honor will not be yours. The Lord will hand Sisera over to a woman." And so the two marched. Mount Tabor stood tall, a lonely hill rising above the Jezreel Valley. Barak's 10,000 men climbed it. From the valley below, Sisera's heavy chariots thundered forward, iron wheels glinting in the sun. Then Deborah gave the signal, "Go. This is the day the Lord delivers Sisera into your hands. God goes before you." Barak and his army charged down the mountain. But they were not alone. Something unseen moved with them. God sent a storm. Rain poured from the heavens. Mud swallowed the wheels of Sisera's chariots. His machines of war turned into useless wreckage. Confusion erupted among his troops, and they were struck down. every single one, except Sechura. He fled on foot, running through the fields, his heart pounding in desperate panic. He ran until he saw a tent. It belonged to Gail, the wife of Haba the Canaanite. Her people were at peace with Jabin, or so Sikora thought. Jael stepped out, her voice gentle, her eyes calm. "Come in, my lord. Do not be afraid." He entered the tent. She covered him with a blanket. "I am thirsty," he whispered. She gave him milk. He relaxed. "Stand at the door," he muttered, his eyes closing. "If anyone comes, say, 'I am not here.'" And he slept. The mighty general, the master of iron, the terror of Israel, fast asleep. Jael moved silently. She took a tent peg in one hand and a hammer in the other. She knelt beside him, raised her arm, and drove the spike clean through his temple. He never woke. When Barak arrived, breathless and searching, Jael stepped out. "Come, I will show you the man you seek." And there he lay, dead. The enemy was defeated by two women, one with deep wisdom, one with fierce boldness. And that day, God gave Israel victory over Jabin, king of Canaan. And slowly his iron grip on the land faded until he was no more. Not every victory ends with a battle cry. Some end with a song. After Sisera fell after Jael's tent, Tag silenced Canaan's greatest threat, and peace returned to the land. Deborah did not simply move on, she sang. With Barak at her side, she lifted her voice not to glorify herself or even her warriors, but to glorify the Lord. And what a song it was, a song of memory, of warning, of worship. When the princes of Israel take the lead, when the people willingly offer themselves, praise the Lord. Deborah remembered the cold fear. She remembered empty roads, how travelers hid, avoiding the highways, how village life had ceased in Israel, until she arose. Until I, Deborah, arose. Arose a mother in Israel. Not a general, not a queen, but a mother. She fought not for land or glory, but for the sacred future of her children. Yet war soon returned to the gates. Yet not a single shield or spear was found among 40,000 in Israel. They had sunk so low. No weapons, no confidence, just fear. But some stood up, and Deborah praised them by name from Ephraim. Why do we flee? From Amalek they marched, Benjamin following. Leaders came from Machir, and from Zebulun came those bearing the leader's staff. She praised those who answered the call and exposed the cowards who hid. Why do we choose comfort over calling Reuben stayed among sheepfolds, Gilead across Jordan, and Dan lingered by the ships? Asher remained on the coast. Faced with terror, they chose safety. Yet others rose. The brave souls of Zebulun risked everything, as did Naphtali, upon the treacherous heights of the battlefield. Then she looked to the cosmos. From the heavens the stars fought. From their orbits they raged against Sisera. Even nature itself joined the war. The Kishon River swept them away in torrents. Chariots drowned, panic spread, and Jael, oh Jael! Deborah saved her deepest honor for this woman who held the tent peg. Most blessed of women is Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite, most blessed of tent-dwelling women. She offered him milk. She brought him curds in a majestic bowl. She reached out for the peg, her right hand for the hammer. She struck Sisera, crushing his skull. At her feet, he sank and fell dead. Yet even in victory, Deborah did not forget the quiet agony of war. She pictured Sisera's mother looking out through the window. She cried, "Why is his chariot taking so long?" She waited in vain, for he would never return. And finally, Deborah sang an ending that echoes through time. So may all your enemies perish, Lord, but let those who love you shine like the sun rising in full strength. And so the land had peace for 40 years, not because of kings, nor because of massive armies. It was because of one woman who listened, and another who dared to act. But that peace was fragile. 40 years passed, and once again the people forgot who they were. They fell into darkness. They turned away, and the Lord handed them over this time to Midian. And these conquerors did not just rule, they devoured. Every harvest, they swarmed the valley like locusts, riding camels, invading in relentless waves. They did not just attack cities, they swept the countryside, stealing crops, killing livestock, and leaving absolutely nothing behind. Just stripped, empty fields, bare trees, and starving families hiding in caves and mountain clefts. For 7 agonizing years, they watched enemies grow fat on their labor. 7 years of silence from heaven, 7 years of terror, until they cried out. God answered them, but not in the way they expected. Not with an army, nor with a king, but with a whisper to a man named Gideon. He was no hero. He was crouching in a wine press, threshing wheat in secret, just to survive. That is where the angel of the Lord found him, right there in his dread, in the dust and the shadows. The messenger looked and said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon looked around in disbelief. Me? If the Lord is with us, then why is this happening? Where are all the wonders our fathers told us about? Didn't he bring us out of Egypt? But now he has abandoned us. The angel did not argue. Instead, he gave a command. Go in this strength of yours and save Israel. I am sending you. But Gideon doubted. My clan is the weakest, he said, and I am the absolute least in my family. Yet the voice insisted, I will be with you. You will strike down Midian as if they were one man. Desperate for proof, Gideon prepared meat and bread upon a rock. The angel touched the offering with his staff. Fire flared from the stone, consuming everything instantly, and the messenger vanished from sight. Gideon fell in terror. I have seen the Lord face to face. But God whispered, Peace. Do not fear. You will not die. So Gideon built an altar there and called it Jehovah Shalom. The Lord is peace. That night his first mission came. Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Build an altar to me and make a sacrifice. Gideon obeyed, but he did it under cover of darkness because even courage begins in small steps. The next morning, the town awoke to a devastating sight. Baal's altar shattered, the sacred pole cut down, and a new altar standing in its place. The crowd was furious. Who did this? They demanded. Learning the truth, they yelled, Gideon must die! But Joash, Gideon's father, the very man who had built that pagan shrine, suddenly stood up and found his voice. Let Baal defend himself, he said, if he is truly a god. And the crowd backed away. From that day on, Gideon was called Jerubbaal, meaning, let Baal contend. But this was only the beginning. Soon the valley of Jezreel filled with hostile forces. Midianites, Amalekites, and others far too numerous to count. Then the Spirit of the Lord took hold of Gideon. He blew his horn, calling the tribes to gather. They answered. Yet Gideon still doubted. He begged for a sign, praying, if you will truly save Israel through me, let this fleece on the threshing floor be wet with dew, while the dry earth surrounds it. Dawn came, and it was so. Still plagued by fear, he asked once more, this time let the wool stay dry. Again God answered. The ground was soaked the fleece dry. Finally, the man from the winepress was ready, not because he felt brave, but because he chose to believe. Below him, the valley crawled with enemies. Amalekites and eastern nomads swarmed the land. Their camels were countless like sand on the seashore. Gideon watched them, trembling. Yet 32,000 Israelite fighters had answered his call and stood behind him. But God had other plans. You have too many men, the Lord warned him. Far too many. If you win with this army, they will boast that they saved themselves. I will not allow it. So God issued a test. Whoever is afraid, go home. Just like that, 22,000 men walked away. Only 10,000 remained. Still too many. God instructed, Take them to the water, and I will test them." Gideon watched as they drank. Most dropped to their knees, burying their faces directly in the rushing stream, but others cupped water in their hands, lapping it like watchful dogs. God said, "Set these apart." There were only 300 of them. 300 men to face an endless, sprawling army. God said, "With these 300, I will deliver you." The rest left. Yet Gideon still battled fear. So God offered him reassurance. "If you are still afraid, go down to their camp. Listen to them." Gideon crept down with his servant Purah, sneaking past tents and camels until they overheard a conversation. Two enemy sentries were talking. One said, "I dreamed a loaf of barley bread came rolling into our camp. It struck a tent and collapsed it." The other soldier grew pale. "That is the sword of Gideon. God has given us into his hands." Hearing this, Gideon did not run. He knelt right there in worship. On enemy soil, he whispered his praise to the Creator. Empowered, he slipped back to his camp. He woke his men with a strategy no military mind would ever dare suggest. "Take horns and clay jars. Hide torches inside them. Follow my lead." 3 companies of 100 men. No swords, just sound and fire. In the dead of night, they encircled the sleeping army. Gideon watched and gave the signal. "Now!" They blew the horns. They smashed the clay jars. They raised their blazing torches and cried out, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." Instantly, the valley erupted. The host awoke in sheer panic. Confused by the sudden fire and noise, they turned on one another, swinging wildly in the dark. Screams echoed. Camels scattered. Men fled blindly into the hills, without Israel ever swinging a single sword. The battle was won before it began. As the survivors fled, tribesmen from Naphtali and Asher joined the chase. Men of Ephraim trapped the fleeing princes Oreb and Zeb, slaying them at landmarks that still bear their names. As the dust settled, Gideon's 300 stood victorious, not because of their strength or physical dominance, but because they trusted a God who wins wars with broken jars and faith in the dark. They obeyed when logic screamed otherwise. Because real faith is not about the size of your army. It is about trusting the whisper in the shadows more than the terrifying sights of the day. Now silence reclaimed the battlefield. The tents were shredded, the camels vanished, the great noise finally stilled. Gideon's name became a legend overnight. The people spoke of him with reverence and awe. They sang of the man who smashed pagan altars and routed a vast army with only 300 soldiers. But the conflict was not over. 2 fugitive Midianite kings, Zebah and Zalmunna, had escaped the slaughter. They fled with their remaining forces. Unwilling to stop, Gideon led his exhausted 300 across the Jordan. Starving and bone-tired, they reached the town of Succoth. Gideon approached the local leaders for help. "Give my men some food. They are weary, but we must catch Zebah and Zalmunna." The elders mocked him. "Do you already hold those kings captive? Why should we feed your army?" Gideon's expression turned cold. "Once the Lord delivers those kings to me, I will return and tear your flesh with desert thorns." At Penuel, he met the same cold refusal. "When I return in triumph," he warned, "I will tear down this tower." Yet he pushed on through the harsh wilderness, climbing the hills until he found his prey. The Midianite army, still trembling with fear, was caught completely off guard. Gideon seized their leaders, Zebah and Zalmunna, the ruthless kings, who slaughtered his kin. Turning back, he marched to Succoth to deliver his cold revenge. "Here are the captive kings you mocked me for chasing," he declared. Then he seized the elders and taught them a lesson written in blood. He whipped them with desert briars, and then he destroyed the great tower of Penuel with furious, swift vengeance. Then he faced the captive kings. "Tell me who?" Slaughtered at Tabor. The kings looked him dead in the eye. "They looked like you, each one like a prince." Gideon's voice cracked. "They were my own brothers, born of my mother. If you had spared them, I would spare you now." He turned to his young son and ordered, "Slay them." But the boy froze in terror. So Gideon stepped forward, and with a single stroke, he ended them. The land was quiet, the enemy gone. Then the people came, crying out, "Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, for you delivered us." This was his moment. The crown was right there. But Gideon said something no conqueror ever says. "I will not rule over you, nor will my son. The Lord will rule over you." He rejected the throne, turning away from power, yet he made one small request. "Let each man give me a single gold earring from his share of the spoils." And they did. Gold piled high over 40 pounds. From this, Gideon fashioned an ephod, a sacred vest, similar to what high priests wore, setting it in his hometown of Ophrah. It was meant to honor God, but it quickly became an idol. The people flocked to worship it, and it turned into a deadly snare, not only for them, but for Gideon's own house. He had many wives, 70 sons, and one child born to a concubine in Shechem named Abimelech. Gideon lived out his days in peace, and Midian never rose again. Gideon, also known as Jerubbaal, died at a good old age. Yet the moment he was gone, the people strained. They ran after the balls. They forgot the Lord, forgot Gideon, and forgot their own history. Because sometimes the ultimate test isn't the battle raging outside. It is the silent battle within. After Gideon's death, quiet ruled the land. But unguarded peace is a fragile thing. Abimelech, the son of Gideon, and a Shechemite concubine harbored a dark ambition. Unwilling to remain one of many, he craved to be the undisputed master. He went to his mother's relatives in Shechem, asking, "Is it better to be ruled by 70 sons of Gideon, or by a single man of your own blood?" The leaders of Shechem, swayed by loyalty and greed, chose Abimelech. They handed him 70 silver shekels from the temple of Baal-berith. With this wealth, Abimelech hired ruthless mercenaries with no conscience. He marched to Ophrah, his father's estate, and slaughtered his 70 brothers on a single stone. Only Jotham, the youngest, survived. Abimelech was crowned king by the sacred oak at Shechem. But Jotham stood on Mount Gerizim and shouted a dark parable. The trees went out to anoint a king. They begged the olive, the fig, and the vine, but all refused. Then they turned to the thorn bush, which sneered, "Take shelter in my shade, or fire will erupt from me." Jotham warned them, "If you have acted in good faith, rejoice in Abimelech. But if not, let fire burst from Abimelech and consume you, and fire from you destroy him." Then Jotham fled. Abimelech ruled for 3 years, but God sowed a spirit of hostility between him and the lords of Shechem. They rebelled. Gaal, son of Ebed, arrived in Shechem and openly challenged the tyrant's grip. Zebul, the city governor, and Abimelech's ally, sent secret word. Abimelech laid a trap. As Gaal stood at the city gates, the ambush sprung. Gaal was driven out. The next morning, as people went to their fields, Abimelech split his troops into 3 groups and struck. He slaughtered the city, wiping it out, and sowed the ground with salt. The remaining leaders fled to the temple tower of El-Berith. Abimelech gathered wood piling, threw it against the walls. He set it ablaze, killing about 1,000 men and women inside. Then he marched to Thebez. The people fled to a heavy fortress there. As he came close to set it on fire, a woman dropped a heavy millstone on his head, crushing his skull. Bleeding, he called to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and kill me. Do not let them say a woman took my life." So his servant pierced him, and he died. This was how God repaid Abimelech for the evil of slaughtering his 70 brothers, a strike against his own father. He also brought the wicked deeds of Shechem back upon their own heads. After the fires of Abimelech's fury finally died down, and the blood in Shechem streets dried, Israel desperately needed healing. Not another warlord, not a bitter man of vengeance, but someone to quiet the storm. That leader was Tola, from the tribe of Issachar. He made his home in the rugged hills of Ephraim in Shamir. He was not loud. He did not conquer foreign lands or burn down pagan altars. He guided Israel for 23 years, leading in quiet, humility, and steady justice. Sometimes divine healing does not arrive with a roaring trumpet, but in a gentle whisper that changes everything. When Tola died, they laid him to rest in Shamir. Then rose Jair the Gileadite. His name meant he shines. He raised 30 sons, each riding his own donkey, each governing a town in Gilead. 30 sons, 30 towns. The people called this region Havoth Jair, meaning the towns of Jair. He judged Israel for 22 years. Like his predecessor, he fought no famous wars, but he stood in the gap. He ruled while others forgot how to lead. He held the fragile nation together until his time came. Jair died and was buried in Camon. These two, Tola and Jair, were not legendary like Gideon, Deborah, or Samson. Yet they were chosen by God. Sometimes the strongest leaders are simply those who stay faithful when everyone else has lost their way. In the wild country of Gilead lived a man named Jephthah. Powerful, skilled, and highly respected for his courage, yet still an outcast. Why? Because Jephthah was the son of a prostitute. His father Gilead had other sons with his legitimate wife. When those boys grew up, they drove Jephthah away. "You will inherit nothing from our father," they declared. "You are not one of us." So Jephthah fled to the land of Tob. There, something entirely unexpected took place. Outcasts gathered around him, nameless, rugged men, desperate, hardened fighters. And Jephthah became their leader. He was cast away but became a commander. Shamed, yet he grew into someone you dared not cross. Years passed, and then the Ammonites attacked Israel. Their massive army moved like a dark storm gathering on the borders. Suddenly, the desperate leaders of Gilead remembered Jephthah. They traveled to Tob, begging him, "Come and lead our forces against Ammon." Jephthah looked them dead in the eye. "Did you not hate me? Did you not drive me out? Why come to me now?" they pleaded. "We are desperate, and if you lead us, we will make you ruler over all Gilead." Jephthah agreed, making them swear a solemn oath before God. They swore it. So Jephthah returned. The rejected outcast came home as commander and ruler. But before drawing his sword, Jephthah tried peace. He sent a message to the Ammonite king asking, "Why do you attack our land?" The king replied, "Because Israel stole our territory when they escaped Egypt. Give it back peacefully." But Jephthah sent a response rich in truth and history. "We only asked for safe passage. The other nations blocked us, and we did not steal your land. God gave it to us. You had 300 years to claim it, so why now? We have not wronged you. You are the one starting this war." The king ignored him. Then the Spirit of the Lord filled Jephthah. He marched across Gilead and Manasseh, advancing straight toward the enemy lines of the Ammonites. But right before the clash, Jephthah made a terrifying, reckless vow. "Lord, if you grant me total victory, I will sacrifice whatever first walks out of my front doors to greet me." He went to war. He conquered 20 cities. The enemy was completely crushed, and Israel was saved. But when Jephthah returned home, the first to run out to welcome him was his own daughter, his only child, dancing with joy. Devastated, Jephthah collapsed. "Oh my, daughter, you have broken my spirit. I have given my word to the Lord, and I cannot break it." She did not cry. She did not plead. She said, "If you promised the Lord, do what you must. Just give me 2 months in the mountains to mourn the future I will never see." He let her go, and upon her return, he fulfilled his tragic vow, a triumph built on shattering heartbreak. For generations after, the young women of Israel would keep her memory alive. They would retreat to the hills to honor her courage. The outcast they threw away became the savior they needed most. Yet his story warns us that reckless words, even spoken in faith, can demand a terrible price. Conquest over the enemy should have brought rest, but bitter pride always demands its tribute. Soon after the battle, the tribe of Ephraim, one of the nation's most powerful clans, came looking for blood. Furious, they confronted. Why turn on each other after winning? The furious Ephraimites confronted Jephthah, screaming, "You left us out! We will burn your home to ashes." Jephthah stood firm, speaking with quiet truth, not rage. "I summoned you, but you ignored me. So I risked my life, fought alone, and God gave me the victory. Why cross me now? But the jealous Ephraimites did not care. They detested being overlooked, hated being eclipsed, but their deepest blow was still to come. They spat insults at Jephthah's people, the Gileadites. "You are just fugitives from Ephraim," they sneered. "You do not belong to a true tribe." Insults escalated to threats, and words erupted into violence. Jephthah had no choice. He summoned, his warriors igniting a tragic civil war between brothers. Ultimately, the Gileadites crushed the armies of Ephraim. They quickly seized the shallow crossings of the Jordan River, blocking the escape route. Every fleeing Ephraimite was stopped and tested. "Pronounce the word Shibboleth," they demanded. But the Ephraimites could not say it right. They said Sibboleth, a tiny linguistic slip that meant life or death. It exposed friend from enemy. And on that bloody riverbank, 42,000 Ephraimites were slaughtered by their own kin. Not foreign enemies, but their own blood. It was a pitch-black day in Israel's history, where envy mattered far more than brotherhood and pride outweighed truth. A tragedy where brothers became mortal enemies over words and unhealed wounds that never healed. After this, Jephthah governed Israel for 6 more years and then passed away. The man who once fought foreign foes was forced to stand against his own blood. Not every chapter of history is loud. Not every ruler wields a sword. Some merely keep the nation steady when the very earth beneath it trembles. After Jephthah's era, Israel was desperately fragile. The people were exhausted from endless conflict, both foreign and domestic. They needed deep stability, and God provided. First arose Ibzan of Bethlehem, who led the nation for 7 years. We have no record of grand military triumphs during his rule, but we do know this. He fathered 30 sons and 30 daughters. He married his daughters to other clans and brought in foreign wives for his sons. Why does this detail matter? It reveals quiet strategic wisdom. Ibzan was not gathering soldiers. He was weaving peace, securing alliances, uniting the nation one family at a time. After his death, they laid him to rest in Bethlehem. Next came Elon of Zebulun, who governed Israel for 10 years. A low-profile leader from an obscure tribe. No wars, no statues, just 10 years of quiet. Sometimes peace is the ultimate victory. Following Elon arose Abdon, the son of Hillel, hailing from the town of Python. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons, who rode 70 donkeys, an ancient mark of wealth and noble status in those days. Abdon led Israel for 8 years. His steady leadership mirrored the donkeys his sons rode, grounded, reliable, and humble. He was not dramatic, but he secured order, and occasionally maintaining that. Peace in a society perpetually teetering on rebellion is the ultimate test. When Abdon passed away, he was laid to rest in Python. 3 rulers, 3 quiet eras. No grand thrones, no swords, just men filling the void between division and order, keeping things stable until the next champion emerged. But Israel slipped back into rebellion, so God delivered them into the hands of the Philistines. For 40 years they dominated Israel, crushing their spirits and growing more arrogant each day. Yet a plan was unfolding, not involving armies nor a powerful king, but a single infant. In the rugged hills of Dan lived a man named Manoah. His wife could never bear children until a divine messenger suddenly appeared before her, announcing, "You will give birth to a son," the angel promised. He must be consecrated from birth. No wine, no forbidden food, and never cut his hair. He will commence the rescue of Israel from Philistine hands. She rushed to inform her husband, and Manoah immediately prayed, "Lord, please send this messenger back to guide us in raising our boy." The holy messenger returned, and when Manoah prepared a meal for him, the visitor declined, saying, "Offer it instead to God." As the flames erupted, the divine messenger ascended inside the fire. Manoah collapsed to the earth in terror, crying, "We have seen God. We will surely die." But his wise, calm wife replied, "If God wanted us dead, he would not have accepted our sacrifice." In time, she delivered a baby boy. They named him Samson, and the breath of God began to stir within him. A Nazirite from birth, holy and set apart. But his supernatural strength would forever clash with his deep vulnerabilities. His sacred destiny locked in combat with his earthly lusts. And that conflict was only starting. Samson grew incredibly powerful, not merely in muscle, but in absolute confidence. Perhaps far too much. One day why do we chase what destroys us? Samson went to Timnah, captivated by a beautiful, forbidden Philistine woman. She was completely forbidden. He rushed home, demanding of his parents, "I saw a woman in Timnah, get her!" His shocked parents pleaded, "Can you not find a wife among our own people, rather than these hostile Philistines?" But Samson demanded, "She is the one." They never realized this reckless, impulsive obsession was actually something far deeper. It was a divine spark, a plan to confront their oppressors. So they set off to arrange the marriage. Walking through a quiet vineyard, Samson was suddenly ambushed. A young lion roared, lunging directly at him from the shadows. In that instant, divine strength surged through him. With bare hands, he ripped the roaring beast apart like a young goat. He kept the secret to himself. Days later, passing that very spot, he noticed the beast's decaying carcass. Inside, wild bees had spun sweet honey. He scooped some out, eating it and sharing with his parents, keeping its origin hidden. At the wedding feast, a dangerous game began. Samson stood tall before 30 young Philistine companions. He proposed a deadly wager. "If you can solve my riddle within 7 days, I will give you 30 fine garments, but if you fail, you owe me 30. They greedily accepted, and Samson delivered his cryptic riddle. Out of the eater came food, and out of the strong came sweetness. For days, the frustrated guests debated. Stumped and desperate, they turned to betrayal. They cornered Samson's new bride, threatening her with a cruel ultimatum. "Coax the answer from him, or we burn you and your family alive." Terrified, she wept and begged him daily. On the final day, he broke. She immediately fed the secret to her people, who confidently answered, "What is sweeter than honey? And what is stronger than a lion?" Samson's eyes narrowed in cold fury. "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." Suddenly, holy power seized him. He stormed into another city, slaughtered 30 men, stripped their garments, and threw them to the cheating guests. Consumed by humiliation, he abandoned his bride. The Philistines, mocking his departure, gave her to his best man. This was no simple heartbreak. It was a declaration of war. Some wounds sliced deeper than any blade. When Samson finally returned to Timnah, his anger still smoldered. Seeking reconciliation, he brought a peace offering. He carried a young goat, demanding to see his wife. But her father blocked the doorway, saying, "I thought you hated her." "I gave her to your best man. Why not take her younger sister instead? She is far more beautiful." Samson's chest burned with a lethal rage. "This time, no one can blame me for the vengeance I unleash." He vanished into the rugged hills. What followed was a terrifying act of psychological warfare. He captured 300 foxes. He tied them tail to tail in pairs, fastening a blazing torch tightly between each terrified duo. He unleashed them into the ripe Philistine fields. Raging fires consumed their vast wheat harvests, vineyards, and groves. Their livelihood turned to ash in a chaotic inferno of revenge. The oppressors stood paralyzed. "Who did this?" they demanded. A whisper rose, "Samson, because his bride was stolen." The Philistines reacted. They did what desperate, cruel men always do. They turned on the woman and her helpless family, burning her and her father alive. Hearing this, Samson did not weep or run. He coldly muttered, "If you do this, I will not stop until I have my full revenge." He struck them down in a brutal, merciless slaughter. Afterward, he retreated deep into a cavern at the Rock of Edom. But his enemies wanted blood. They mobilized a massive army. His own countrymen, the men of Judah, confronted him. "Why are you bringing war to us?" they demanded. Samson replied, "I only paid them back in full for what they did to me." The fearful men pleaded, "We must hand you over. They rule us." Samson replied, "Swear you won't kill me yourselves." They bound him tightly with brand new unbreakable ropes, dragging their captive leader down to the enemy. As his captors approached, the waiting Philistines roared with triumph. Suddenly, a rush of divine fury overtook him. The heavy ropes snapped and fell from his arms like charred thread. Scanning the ground, he seized a raw weapon, the dry jawbone of a donkey. With that crude bone, he single-handedly slaughtered 1,000 warriors. Standing over a bloody sea of enemies, he boasted with a donkey's jawbone, "I have piled them high. With this simple bone, I struck down 1,000. He tossed it aside, naming the hill Ramath Lehi. But victory brings exhaustion. Dying of thirst, he cried, "You gave me this triumph only for me to perish here." Then God opened the earth. Samson drank, showing us that even our deepest deserts can yield life. He revived. He named it En-Hakkore, the caller's spring. From that moment, Samson judged Israel for 20 years. A warrior, a rebel, a storm in human skin, yet chosen by God. Samson, the strongest man in Israel. But his weakness wasn't war. It was beauty. One day he traveled to Gaza, deep in Philistine territory. He spent the night with a woman there. The Philistines heard and set a trap. At dawn we strike. They sealed the gates and surrounded him, but Samson woke at midnight, and instead of sneaking out, he walked right to the city gates. 2 towering doors of iron and stone. He tore them off their hinges, locks and all. Hoisting them onto his shoulders, he carried them up to a hilltop overlooking Hebron. He wasn't just escaping. He was sending a message, "You cannot trap me." But even giants fall, and for Samson, her name was Delilah, from the valley of Sorek. Once again, he fell. The Philistine lords saw their chance. They came to her with a promise find, out the secret of his strength. How can he be bound? We will each give you 1,100 silver coins. And Delilah smiled. She did not need to fight. She just had to ask, "Samson, what makes you so strong? How could someone tie you up to make you weak?" He played with her. "Tie me with 7 fresh bowstrings, and I will be as weak as anyone else." That night, while he slept, she did. When the Philistines burst in, she cried, "Samson, the Philistines are here!" He snapped the bowstrings like burnt thread. And Delilah pouted. "You lied to me. Tell me the truth." He grinned. "Use new ropes. That will work." She tried again. Same result. "Weave my hair into the loom." She did. He broke free again. But Delilah was not done. Day after day, she begged, pleaded, and cried until Samson was tired to death. Finally, he gave her her heart, his deepest truth. "I am a Nazirite from birth. If my hair is shaved, my strength will leave, and I will be like any other man." Knowing he was serious, she sent word, "Come back. He has told me everything." That night, she lulled him to sleep on her lap. And as he slept, she shaved off his 7 locks of hair. Then she whispered, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He woke up ready to fight, thinking, "I will break free, just like before." But he did not know the Lord had abandoned him. They seized him, blinded him, and bound him in bronze chains, throwing him into prison. The mighty judge of Israel was now forced to grind grain in the dark. But in that dark silence, a miracle was growing. His hair began to grow back. Samson, once feared by whole armies, was now a mere trophy, blind, bound, forgotten. The Philistines could not contain their joy. Mighty Samson brought so low. They threw a great feast in the temple of their god Dagon. Thousands gathered, rulers, nobles, and spectators. They drank, they cheered, and then someone shouted, "Bring Samson out! Let him entertain us." So they brought him the man who once tore lions apart, now stumbling, guided by a young servant boy. They mocked him, laughed at him, and paraded him through the crowd like a trophy. Then Samson whispered to the boy, "Put my hands on the pillars. I need to rest." He was led to the two central columns, the ones supporting the entire building. And there, in that place of deep humiliation, he prayed, not loud, not proud, just real. "Lord God, remember me. Strengthen me once more. Let me just this once avenge my eyes." With both hands he reached out, he braced. He pushed, crying, "Let me die with the Philistines." The pillars groaned, the ceiling cracked, and the temple collapsed. Stone, dust, and screams filled the air. Samson's final act was his most powerful. He killed more in his death than during his entire life. Under the rubble, his enemies were gone. So was he. Later, his brothers came. They recovered his body and buried him in the tomb of his father Manoah. And the man they buried had judged Israel for 20 years. A story of strength, a story of weakness, a story of failure and grace. Even in his brokenness, God used him. And sometimes, God's greatest victories are born from our lowest moments. In the hills of Ephraim lived a man named Micah. One day he confessed to his mother, "The 1,100 pieces of silver stolen from you, I have them." His mother responded, "Blessed be my son by the Lord." She then dedicated the silver to the Lord, ordering that a portion be used to forge a carved image and a metal idol. So Micah took the silver, and an idol was made. He set up a shrine in his house, crafting an ephod. He kept household idols and made his own son a priest. Back then, Israel had no king. People lived by their own moral compass. Meanwhile, a young traveler from Bethlehem set out on a journey. Searching for shelter, he arrived at Micah's door. Micah begged, "Stay with me. Be a father and priest to me. I will pay you 10 silver coins a year, provide your clothes, and cover your living costs." The priest agreed. Micah consecrated him, believing it secured his future. He said, "Now I am certain that God will bless me because I hired a proper priest." But this was not what God wanted. It was a cheap counterfeit mixing sacred truth with human desire. Around that time, the tribe of Dan was hunting for a homeland. They sent 5 spies who eventually wandered to Micah's estate. There they recognized the young priest's accent. They demanded to know, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this house?" After he explained his hired position, they pleaded with him, "Please, ask your God if our mission will succeed." The hired priest gave a comfortable answer. "Go in peace. Your path is fully approved by the Lord." Reassured, the spies traveled on and discovered the city of Laish, where people lived in quiet peace. They hurried back to their tribe, urging, "We must attack immediately. The soil is rich, and God has handed it to us." Soon, 600 armed warriors marched out. When they reached Micah's property, the 5 spies whispered to the army, "Do you know what lies inside these private homes? There is a sacred vestment, household gods, and silver idols. Think about what we should do next." They broke inside and seized the silver figures, the sacred vestment, and the family gods. The startled priest cried out, "What do you think you are doing?" They snarled, "Shut your mouth and come with us. Be our spiritual leader." Isn't it far better to lead an entire tribe of Israel than to serve one lonely household? The priest was thrilled. He grabbed the sacred vestment, pocketed the idols, and eagerly joined the marching crowd. When Micah discovered his life savings were gone, he rallied his neighbors and chased the thieves. He screamed, "You stole my handmade gods and my hired priest," and just walked away. "What do I have left?" The bandits warned him, "Do not raise your voice at us. Some of our angry soldiers might kill you and your family." Realizing he was completely outmatched, Micah turned back in defeat. The plunderers kept everything he had crafted, along with his submissive priest, and advanced on Laish. They launched a surprise raid, slaughtering the peaceful citizens and burning their town to ashes. Then they rebuilt the city, renamed it Dan, and established their stronghold. They erected the stolen idol. Shockingly, Moses' own grandson Jonathan and his family served as the high priests for this compromised tribe until the nation fell into exile. They worshipped Micah's cheap imitation god the entire time. The true sanctuary stood in Shiloh. This is a dark tragedy of stolen faith, of customized religion, where personal comfort replaced divine truth, a whole tribe trading ancient covenants for quick convenience, and a country living by its own subjective rules. In this chaotic era, a religious worker lived in the rugged hills of Ephraim. He married a companion from Bethlehem, but her betrayal fractured their home. She packed her things and fled, back to her childhood home. 4 months later, he traveled to reconcile. The father-in-law welcomed him with extreme hospitality, urging them to linger. They feasted, laughed, and avoided the journey. But on the 5th day, the husband insisted they must go. They finally departed late in the afternoon, traveling until dusk approached. They reached the hostile town of Gibeah. Needing a safe place to sleep, they sat exposed as nobody offered shelter. Finally, an elderly laborer returned from the fields. He insisted, "Come inside. Do not sleep in the dangerous square." Inside his home, they found food and safety. But as darkness settled, pure horror arrived. Ruthless men surrounded them, dwelling, hammering on the door. "Bring out the stranger so we can satisfy our lusts." The host begged, "Please, do not commit such a monstrous crime against my guest." In a desperate, shocking compromise, he pushed out the traveler's helpless companion into the street. The mob assaulted and violated her mercilessly through the dark hours. At dawn, she collapsed on the threshold. When her husband opened the door, he stared down at her limp body. He said, "Get up. We must leave." Silence. She was dead. Loading her body onto his donkey, he returned home. In blind despair and fury, he committed an unthinkable act. He carved her body into 12 gruesome pieces, sending a portion to every corner of the land. His terrifying message demanded, "Look at what we have become." The tribes assembled. Can a single tragedy break an entire nation? 400,000 furious soldiers gathered before God, demanding justice. They sent word to Benjamin, "Deliver the wicked men of Gibeah to us, that we may purge this evil." But the tribe of Benjamin refused. Instead, they armed themselves for war. Brother prepared to fight brother. The nation of Israel marched out. On day 1, Benjamin slaughtered 22,000 Israelites. On day 2, 18,000 more fell. But on the 3rd day, Israel set a trap. They burned the city completely, surrounding the warriors of Benjamin, and 25,000 Benjamites were slaughtered. Only 600 survived, fleeing into the desolate wilderness. Then Israel turned on Benjamin's towns, burning, killing, and erasing everything. After the bloodshed, deep sorrow came. The tribes gathered and wept bitterly before God, crying, "One tribe is almost wiped out. What have we done?" They had sworn a solemn oath. "No daughter of ours shall marry a Benjamite." But to save the remnant, they found one. Town Jabesh Gilead, which had boycotted the assembly. They raided it, killing everyone except 400 young women. These became wives for the 600 Benjamite survivors, but it still was not enough. So they made a plan. During the festival at Shiloh, the young girls will dance in the vineyards. Let the Benjamites lie in wait. And when the women appear, each man must capture a wife. And that is exactly what they did. The Benjamites took wives, rebuilt their shattered homes, and returned to their land. And the book of Judges closes with one final sentence. A sentence that explains everything. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what seemed right in their own eyes. The book of Judges is no dusty relic of history. It is a psychological mirror, a window into modern man's spiritual exile. What began with Joshua's pure faith ended in chaos. They had the land, they had the divine law, they had legendary stories of miracles and deliverance, yet they lacked one essential thing: a heart committed to remembering. We watched them conquer nations, only to worship idols, cry out in agony, then forget him once more. Each judge brought temporary hope: Othniel, Deborah, Gideon, Jephthah, Samson. But their stories always revealed the same cycle: rebellion, disaster, desperate cries, deliverance, then back to rebellion. A relentless cycle that never broke, only spiraled downward. They did not just need another savior. They needed a king, not merely a hero to rescue them from external enemies, but a leader for their hearts. Not just a warrior, but a true shepherd who could shatter the vicious cycle forever. And centuries later, that promised king arrived. Born not in a palace, but in a stable. He would ride not on a grand chariot, but on a humble donkey. He would wear no golden crown, but thorns. And he would conquer not just physical armies, but sin, death, and hell itself. His name was Jesus, the ultimate and final judge, the king they desperately desired, the king we still need today. The book of Judges ends in darkness, yet it points toward the light. A lost people, a God who never abandoned them, a narrative waiting for redemption. And the ultimate question remains: in a world where everyone does what is right in their own eyes, will you choose the way of the king?